Codependency, the psychology of polarity, complementarity, enabling, and attachment. Written by Gregory Haynes. Narrated by Sarah Margrave. Chapter 1. Is your relationship one of codependence? Popular definitions of codependence are so broad that anyone would be categorized as codependent. The definition and usefulness of the codependence principle is diluted by these broad definitions. Ever since starting my research study of inefficient helping, I have tried to pin down the codependence principle. I like to see codependent relationships as a specific kind of dysfunctional helping relationship. Generally speaking, in inefficient helping relationships, someone's help supports or allows the other person's underachievement, irresponsibility, immaturity, addiction, procrastination, or poor mental or physical health. The assistant does so by doing such things as saving the other from self-imposed situations, bearing their negative effects for them, accommodating their unhealthy or careless behaviors, and taking care of them such that they do not develop or show proficiencies normal for those of their age or abilities. Although these unbalanced relationships can go on for a bit of time, they're eventually unsustainable due to their consumption of the helper's physical, psychological, or financial resources, and because they cause animosity and relationship strain. Inefficient helping relationships do not necessarily involve codependence, but they may. Codependent relationships are close relationships where much of the love and intimacy in the relationship is experienced in the context of a single person's distress and the other's saving or enabling. The assistant shows love primarily through the provision of support, and the other feels loved primarily when they get assistance. The intense shared experiences of the other's struggles and disasters and the helper saves deepen the emotional connection and feelings of intimacy. In a codependent relationship, the assistant's psychological enmeshment leads them to acutely feel the other's battles and to feel guilt at the thought of limiting their help or ending the relationship. This motivates them to reduce the other's suffering and their own by continued helping and makes them fast to withdraw of any limitations they set. Helpers susceptible to codependent relationships typically find intimacy in relationships where their main role is that of a rescuer, supporter, and confidant. These assistants are typically depending on the other's poor functioning to please psychological needs such as the need to feel needed, and the need to keep the other close because of fears of abandonment. Feeling competent, relative to the other, also increases the low self-esteem of some helpers. In codependent relationships, the other's reliance on the assistant is also deep. The other is bound to the helper because the helper's prolonged help has restrained their maturity, life skills, or confidence, or allowed their dependency or poor psychological or physical health, making them dependent on the assistant's assistance. Their poor functioning brings them needed love, care, and concern from the assistant, further reducing their motivation to change. Due to their below-average performance, these others might have few relationships as close as their relationship with the helper. This makes them highly dependent on the assistant to satisfy a lot of the needs met by close relationships, such as the need to matter to someone and the need for care. It's this high degree of mutual, unhealthy reliance on the part of both the assistant and the other that makes the relationship codependent and resistant to change. While it is true that some inefficient helping relationships are indeed codependent, And it's also true that codependence may appear from some of your personality types. Beware in your adoption of the codependent name. Or at the very least, don't wave it around like a flag of fate. I'm codependent and I cannot help myself because that's just what I do. And remember that dysfunctional helping is complex. It's motivated by a variety of aspects and should not be minimized to easy ideas of codependence. Chapter 2: The Psychology of Enabling. So, here is a question. Why do friends and family continue to allow their loved ones? I'm certain if I pose this question to people that I know that have addiction problems in their family, they would leap up and down and say that they aren't enabling, but helping or being helpful. There's a huge difference, and often it's a fine line, but a very essential line to understand the distinction of allowing versus a healthy partnership. Here are several reasons, when many times we know this is not the right transfer to make. Are we such codependents and enablers? Or, why are we addicted to being an enabler? Number 1. Do not want to hurt the alcoholic or addict's emotions by saying no, or I'm not comfortable with your demand, or just not concurring with their plan. Number 2. Scared of the anger or retaliation that might originate from not giving their request. Number 3. Afraid that they could do something bad and act out. The alcoholic or addict can so quickly say, "I'll show you, you'll be sorry." Number 4. We will be perceived inadequately or indifferent. The alcoholic or addict can very easily turn the tables back on you as not caring, or that you are an evildoer or mean. Also, and not to be taken lightly, the judgment of others like family members that have no clue what goes on behind closed doors will assess your actions. I know with my own members of the family, they have often said to me, "And what's your part in this?" We have no part when it comes to the alcoholic or addict and their addiction or healing. As Alcoholics Anonymous 12-step healing programs say, you didn't cause it, you cannot cure it, and you can't control it. Truer and wiser words were never ever said about this topic in history. Number 5. One more time, I'm going to try it that way. The alcoholic or addict always appears to plead for one more time, one more chance to make the wrong right. The past is an instructor, and if we overlook those teaching that we have been down this roadway with poor or unsatisfactory results, why give it more time for failure? Number 6. Maybe this time it will be different. Just like number 5, all of us want to think this time will be so different from other times. Whether it is something little like a time curfew or guaranteeing to stop the dependency this time for good, we bump along the bottom and hope that this time will be different. But if it's not, then what? Number 7. Want to be loved by the other. More regularly with parents than spouse, siblings, or friends, parents or caretakers want to be pals with their kids. Perhaps they're offsetting not being available to their children or blaming themselves for critical times in their child's life when they were absent. Well, better late than never, so if they feel close with their kids, they will be able to prevent all of the bad stuff and have a relationship that is now better than ever. The parent could think that they are making brownie points for being a great pal. But believe me, the good deed is brief resided in the eyes of the alcoholic and addict till the next demand, which can be just some hours away. Number 8. too lazy to change anything about themselves. When I was a treatment counselor, the parents of court mandated adolescents had to have a parent or parents attend a family session for therapy. Lots of the parents or caregivers were too exhausted, too busy, or too lazy to change the guidelines and guidelines concerning their loved one's dependency issues or questionable recovery process. They had been down this road for so many years that they were tired of continuing to tread over the same course. They had jobs or other responsibilities to attend to and didn't have the energy anymore. Number 9. Worried. Being choked with fear or worry has many individuals do things that they later regret. Worry is a substantial frame of mind and can blind us to hitting the pause button and going back to reassess the issue. We are often scared of the alcoholic or addict in our life because we just do not know what's coming. Keeping peace, not rocking the boat, comes from fear, as the outcome of not giving in is just too great on us emotionally, physically, and maybe financially. We are in essence being imprisoned by the alcoholic or addict by their actions and ultimately our own fear. Number 10. This dance has become part of my life for so long. They do not know what they would do without it. There are people who have made a lifestyle of being a professional enabler or codependent. For all the reasons above, this is who they are and how they tick. Their own life is unfulfilling and they have to supervise, run, and control others, or just take part in a passive-aggressive way. We all act as enablers and codependents at some particular times in our lives. It is humanity, and it is heartbreaking to see our loved ones traveling 90 miles an hour to a brick wall of destruction when we think we have superhuman powers and have the ability to stop it. Not one time, but over and over again. We are not actually doing our loved ones any good by living in fear of their threats, trying to be best buds, believing this time will be different, or too lazy to do anything about their particular behavior. Go back and regroup and get to a healthy, productive way to take part in their healing, or, if they are not in recovery and your life is a living hell, simply because of the disrespect and harmful luggage that they bring to the family, remember, you do have alternatives. They could hurt initially, but they will be more efficient in the long run than, as I said before, just bumping along the bottom, hoping something one day will change. Chapter 3. Freedom. If you really love something, set it free. If it returns, it's yours. If not, it was never ever meant to be. What is the true meaning of this old proverb? Some interpret it as a description of destiny. Only fate or destiny can determine whether a relationship was meant to be. Therefore, if you let someone go, they will return if that is your destiny. For those of us who don't believe in determinism, this explanation doesn't ring true. A much better interpretation is that you can't force somebody to love you. You have to give them the flexibility to choose. A more plausible interpretation turns on your behavior in relationships. Not many people have a protected attachment style. Most are either restless or avoidant, at least to some degree. Both types of insecure attachment style are generally grounded in fear of abandonment, rejection, or criticism. But the behavior manifesting of a distressed attachment style is not the same as that of the avoidant attachment style. It will generally generate clingy behavior and an important need to be with other people all of the time. Many people with an anxious attachment style feel lonesome and insecure when they have to hang out on their own. They are addicted to company and close friendships or relationships. When he or she is in a relationship, the restless type tends to control the other person's conduct in subtle or not so subtle ways. For example, she or he could attempt to make the other person feel guilty for not spending enough time with them. They are pretty quick to show jealousy, which is another way to try to make the other individual spend more time with them. Nervous types feel worse in less dedicated relationships than in committed relationships. But even a firm commitment is not enough to make them feel protected. They continue to be horrified that the other person will leave. They will want to know what their partner is doing 24/7. One way they accomplish this is via frequent calls or texts. Some anxious types use verbal abuse or physical violence in an effort to force the other person into sticking with them. The behavior symptoms of the restless attachment style are really comparable to codependency, though I prefer to say that a nervous attachment style could generate codependency. In case the anxious and avoidant attachment styles are based on the same youth disregard, what identifies whether a person develops a distressed or an avoidant attachment style? Well, we do not know that for sure, but one of the best theories is that the deserted kid will explore different ways to handle the desertion. If the child discovers that being entirely independent and not sharing his emotions with anyone is the best way to bury the pain, he will normally continue the pattern. If he finds that controlling people into being his friend or into being there for him, he will normally continue this conduct. The first coping system leads to an avoidant attachment style, and the second leads to a nervous attachment style. Though restless types have a tendency to form longer and more dedicated relationships contrasted with the avoidant types, their relationships seldom last a lifetime. They could even be quite short, as it's only a matter of time before their partner will be adequately fed up with the controlling element of the restless individual's conduct and will want out. Chapter 4: Complementarity and Polarity. People with complementary personalities can provide a missing link for each other. In theory, it seems like this arrangement ought to work just fine. And in most cases, it does, at the very least for a while. However, ultimately, if things don't change, it breaks down. A relationship in which both people are enduring the strengths of each other instead of enhancing those qualities within themselves is destined to ultimately run into trouble. Though it might appear that one partner is more reliant than the other, they're typically both reliant on each other to supply the relationship with the balance that it requires. The problem is that while the relationship could be well balanced and getting the resources that it needs, neither individual is feeling complete. This condition is known as codependency. Codependency is not the middle ground between self-reliance and dependence. It is the inescapable outcome of an imbalanced relationship in which both partners are unwittingly colluding with each other to perpetuate a system that has some obvious benefits and some not so apparent downsides. Polarity is specified by the dictionary as the presence or manifesting of two contrasting principles or propensities. Polarities in which partners have varying or perhaps opposite perspectives or personality traits also show up in forms aside from independent and dependent. Other examples include thinkers and feelers, self-indulgent and other-centered, initiators and reactors, slow-paced and busy, doers and contemplatives, connection lovers and solitude lovers, rescuers and those in need of rescue, optimists and pessimists, planners and spontaneous driven, highly sensitive and less sensitive, extroverts and introverts, connectors and flexibility fighters. Differences can enliven a partnership. They only end up being an issue when we find ourselves at opposite ends of the pole, to put it simply, polarized. This happens when the distinctions become troublesome because we view our partner through eyes of judgment, disapproval, or criticism. In all cases, it refers learning how to respect the differences. In so doing, we end up being able to see each other through eyes of appreciation and appreciation. All of us tend to attract people with complementary temperaments, not simply because we like making things hard, but because, on an unconscious level, we know that we have something to learn much from this individual. We have attracted them in order to supply us a chance to cultivate an element of ourselves that could improve the quality of our life. If distinctions end up being problematic, they need to be resolved. The first step in this process is to acknowledge that things are not going as well as one or both partners would like. That condition may be illuminated by the presence of signs that are appearing within one or both partners. A few examples of these symptoms are depression and changes in mood, a boost in the frequency and strength of arguments, often feeling victimized or blamed by each other, an obvious drop in the frequency of or desire for sexual relations on one or both parts, feeling distant and detached from each other. When symptoms appear, it is best to resolve them faster instead of later. The longer these conditions remain present, the more hazardous and entrenched things end up being. The person who initially recognizes that things are not going well has the responsibility to acknowledge their concern to their partner and to start efforts to attend to the circumstance. Frequently, couples have the ability to make great strides in dealing with relationship disruptions on their own. At times, professional support could be needed. It's always a great idea to try to put the corrections in on your own. However, it can also be easy to misjudge the magnitude of the difficulty if toxic conditions have gone unacknowledged for a long time. Just because we attract others who match our strengths and weak points, occasional disturbances are inescapable. Coming to terms with distinctions needs a significant change in mindset, not a change in who we essentially are. The repair that needs to take place can not only bring back the trust and respect that may have decreased over time, but can greatly deepen these feelings. As much of us ends up being more entire and well-balanced within ourselves, we end up being more totally available to each other and have more to give the relationship. This promotes a cycle of positive reinforcement that enables us to transform breakdowns into breakthroughs. To customize this info, you can do this quick but powerful connection exercise. Where do you see yourself falling on the spectrum of connection between 0, mostly fixated on self, to 10, mostly concentrated on others? How do you feel in regard to where you stand on the spectrum? Do you see an important need to move in another direction? If so, what could you do to shift the balance? Chapter 5: How to develop a well-balanced relationship with depending upon one another. All of us relate to each other in different ways. There are people who are very independent in relationships. Others rely, and certain people are codependent, which means they put aside their own well-being to maintain a relationship with another. The healthiest way we can connect with those near to us is by being truly interdependent. That is where two people, both strong individuals, are involved with each other, but without sacrificing themselves or jeopardizing their values. What they have is a well-balanced relationship, and regrettably, it isn't all that typical. Having said that, it is achievable with just a little awareness and understanding. First, you really need to assess where you are right now. If there's way too much neediness, which can be a turnoff, or you feel that your partner is way too independent and does not want to be with you, rebalancing how you relate is extremely important. Without it, both of you will always feel out of sync, and that isn't a great formula for a harmonious adult connection. Once you have established where you are, begin looking at how you got there. Ask one another some questions like, did this start because of an argument? Or, is this what you really want? And, how can we make it better for the both of us? Getting clarity before starting a journey of change is essential. Create some of your own questions that are very specific to your relationship and lifestyle. If one of you travels, the two of you are going to have different concerns from couples who are around one another 24/7. Every relationship is different, and there are a myriad of things couples can do to make things better if they both want to. And therein lies the rub. Sometimes, when the person we're with has shown behaviors that make us awkward or cause us pain, we think that we truly do not want things to be different. We just want them to be over. And that can be a huge, uncomfortable, and life-altering choice. What couples really need to learn how to do is discuss what they're feeling and make the necessary modifications so that both people can feel better. First off, though, you have to get out of your stubbornness and let the healing happen. The best inspiration for this is to recognize that when your other half feels good about your relationship, so will you. Understand that the changes you are contemplating aren't just for another person, or perhaps your relationship. You are also making them for yourself. That isn't selfish, it's appropriate. It's also part of what makes interdependence an admirable objective for your relationship. People can live in unbalanced relationships for a lifetime. What they do not see is that by making some simple realizations and changes about the way you associate with your partner, you can change your entire life for the better. Living in an interdependent relationship gives you both respect and nurturing. What a great way to go through life! Chapter 6. Easy guidance that will change your relationship for good. When in a tough relationship, it's all too simple to lose yourself. As couples struggle to find what will fix things, they stop remembering to nurture themselves and ensure that they stay healthy as people. You know this has happened when one day you realize that you don't like yourself, don't like your partner, don't like your life, and are just plain dissatisfied. To those couples, I say this: find yourself again and be somebody whom you like. Find who it is you were when you liked yourself the best, and start being that person again. Act in a way that strengthens your own cherished qualities, and you will, once again, be that individual. When you do this, it is likely that you're going to also enhance the boundaries between you and your partner, moving from any negative codependent behaviors you might have had. This guidance has helped many couples start to navigate tough relationships and usually includes a wonderful surprise. One note that I just got puts it this way: daily, I am executing your guidance to be a person whom you like. It has been a life changer. Now, in the lack of my passive-aggressive, shameful outburst, I have become a person I like, and my partner has said he loves the new me also. Finding yourself again and being the person you like is just a beginning place. Being an individual you love and take pride in can relax your relationship significantly, but will not solve all of your issues. Having said that, it will most likely improve your settlements. If, like the woman above, you like yourself better and your partner likes you better, then you start your negotiations for the staying issues from a substantially better point. Would you rather speak with a person who is passive-aggressive and shamefully, or somebody whom you adore, with whom you will try harder to find common ground, who will make you feel more defensive? A lot of grown-ups make the presumption that they can direct, nag, or educate a partner into doing things in a different way. A way better technique, I think, is to be the person you love. Chances are good that this person you really love is also somebody your partner treasures, and that's the best possible place from which you can begin to resolve your problems. Chapter 7. Going from codependence to prodependence. Codependence is a deficit-based trauma model that views loved among addicts as inherently shocked, out of control, and excessively obsessed with their troubled loved one. Prodependence is a strength-based attachment model that views caregiving loved ones of addicts and other struggling people as heroes for continuing to really love, help, and stay attached, regardless of the debilitating presence of addiction or some other serious problem. Codependence, as typically comprehended, takes place when someone tries to control the actions of another in the guise of helping so they can feel better about themselves and their relationship with that other person. The codependence model is rooted in conversations of early life trauma and the ways in which that can impact later life behaviors and relationships. Unfortunately, for many loved ones of addicts and lots of therapists, framing a person's dedication to helping a distressed loved one as stemming from that individual's reignited early life trauma, rather than being an expression of love and commitment, feels negative, as if the caregiving loved one is being blamed, shamed, and pejoratively labeled for loving way too much, or not improperly, or for selfish reasons. This wasn't the original intent of the codependence movement, but it's what we've presently got. And based upon this morphed belief system, the advice normally given by codependence experts and therapists is that it's better for loved ones of addicts to detach with love and focus on caring for themselves, in particular, working to heal their own assumed early life trauma, the trauma that is said to underlie and drive their unhealthy caretaking, than to concentrate on their struggling loved one. In this way, codependence has come to mean caring for yourself instead of your addicted loved one, instead of caring for yourself and your addicted loved one, as the co-addiction movement originally meant and encouraged. Even worse, the codependency label now applies a pathological sheen to the ones that love and look after addicts and other troubled people, if not officially, then in the collective state of mind. Nowadays, people labeled as codependent are typically dealt with as though they have dependent personality disorder, even when their conduct does not even remotely method that level of pathological neediness and enmeshment. Codependence has devolved from a formal model of treatment for a particular population to a basic term for being extremely dependent or enmeshed. Informally, this is called being a co. According to the codependence model as it is currently practiced, the answer to an individual's issues with a distressed loved one is to stop saving. No rescue means no drama. If loved ones of addicts would just look within to identify the true source of their pathological saving, their unresolved trauma, they would be able to separate with love, to stop caretaking, and to self-actualize, or so the theory goes. To that end, spouses, parents or caretakers, sisters and brothers, and good friends of addicts and other challenged people are consistently counseled to explore their own trauma-based weakness, to step from the dysfunction of their failing loved one, to stop saving, to stop enabling, and to stop being so codependent. Regrettably, this approach doesn't empathetically meet them where they are, anxious, fearful, angry, and so on. nor does it mirror their internal reality. Therefore, they often respond negatively to these tips, thinking and saying things like, "How can I possibly abandon a person I love, especially in his or her hour of inmost really need?" Or worse, "So you are telling me that my working 3 jobs and doing every little thing I can to keep this family together is my issue? Well, I'm sorry, but at least I'm functional. What about that guy I live with who loses jobs and drives intoxicated with our children in the car? Isn't he the inefficient one? I'm trying to find support, not judgment." And so it goes. Pro-dependence. No labels, no pathology. Just love, support, and direction. Pro-dependence is an attachment-focused term I have created to describe relationships that are healthily synergistic, where someone's strengths fill in the weaknesses of the other, and vice versa, with this shared support happening automatically and without question. As applied to caregiving loved ones of addicts, pro-dependence describes the amazing loving efforts that partners, parents, and good friends offer when attempting to help someone to whom they're deeply connected, even when that individual has become chronically inefficient. Instead of blaming, shaming, and pathologizing such people for loving too much or enabling instead of helping, pro-dependence celebrates their need and desire to love and to caretake when appropriate. Pro-dependence views the act of loving and attempting to help an addict or a likewise troubled individual heal, or make it through the day without creating or experiencing catastrophe, as an indicator of healthy attachment, or at least the desire for healthy attachment. With pro-dependence, there's no shame or blame, no sense of being wrong, no language that creates a pathology for a loving caretaker. Rather, there's recognition for effort given, plus hope and helpful direction for healing. To treat the loved ones of addicts using pro-dependence, we need not find that something is wrong with them. We can just acknowledge the trauma and the inherent dysfunction that happens when living in a close relationship with an addict. Then, we can guide them toward enjoying more successfully, with better self-care and limits. Similar to codependence, pro-dependence acknowledges that when a caretaker's actions run off the rails and end up being counterproductive, making it possible for raving enmeshment, and yes, this happens quite a lot when a person is attempting to keep an eye on and assist a deeply struggling loved one, measures can be taken to put the relationship back on track. Nonetheless, pro-dependence doesn't suggest that a caregiver's dysfunctional behaviors emerge out of any past or present trauma or pathology of their own, regardless of whether they have such concerns. Instead, pro-dependence views their actions as an effort to maintain or restore their family and their relationships. Pro-dependence does not ever consider efforts made to help a loved one recover as pathology, even if those attempts to help are misdirected and inadequate. Under no circumstance does pro-dependence imply that love is or can become pathological. Instead, pro-dependence acknowledges that liking an unforeseeable, addicted partner who blames, lies, seduces, manipulates, and gaslights to maintain a dependency or some other dysfunction can make practically anyone look insane gradually. Since that's the kind of conduct that puts people in crisis, and people in crisis can look crazy. Interestingly, pro-dependence suggests and executes the same fundamental restorative actions as codependence, a fresh or restored fixate on self-care coupled with the implantation of healthier boundaries. This being said, the models approach this work from greatly different viewpoints. Codependence. As a deficit-based trauma model, views the loved among addicts as distressed, harmed, and taking part in unhealthy caretaking habits as a result of that. Pro-dependence. As a strength-based, attachment-driven model, views the loved among addicts as heroes for continuing to really love and continuing to stay affixed regardless of the debilitating presence of dependency. Rather than blaming, shaming, or pathologizing, deeply attached caretakers, Instead of telling them that their actions are being driven by unconscious efforts to recover their unsettled trauma, Codependent says, "You're a terrific person for putting so much effort into helping your addicted loved one. It is possible, though, that you're not actually doing that as successfully as you might be. And who can blame you for that? It's hard to worry about loving somebody in the best possible way when you are in the middle of a catastrophe zone. If the house is burning down, you get your loved one and drag that individual out of the fire. And you do not worry about whether you're grabbing too hard or in a way that hurts. Now that you are in therapy, though, we can slow things down and figure out how you can help the addict more efficiently, in ways that may be more effective to the addict and your relationship, and that will not trigger you to feel so overloaded." That is the spirit of the Codependence model. Codependent treatment with loving caretakers acknowledges and accepts, firstly, that these individuals are in crisis and they are likely to behave accordingly. As such, they will show emotional liability. They could also use superhuman effort with household tasks, childcare, physician's visits, home health care, and making extra money to pay for everything. And they behave in these ways as an expression of love and attachment, not pathology. In other words, the Codependence model encourages therapists and clients to celebrate the natural and healthy human need to develop and maintain intimate connections and to offer continuous support to loved ones, even in the face of addiction or some other exceptionally uncomfortable life problem. Chapter 8. Detachment with Love. Like thousands before me who visited the Accademia in Florence, Italy, I was amazed by the majesty of Michelangelo's statue of David. Yet I was most taken with the artist's statues of 4 prisoners or slaves, his non finito, insufficient works. The prisoners consist of 4 nudes with only parts of their bodies, like the head or leg, complete. The rest of their bodies are trapped inside the marble trying to emerge. The prisoners stimulate the enormous strength of creative expression and the everlasting struggle of humans to free themselves from bondage. During that sea, I felt as trapped as though detainees. For several years, I struggled to control my adult child's substance abuse. My efforts failed, but that didn't stop me. I thought that if I tried hard enough, shouted loud enough, and threatened long enough, my child would stop the madness that was destroying his life. When his checks bounced, I covered them. When he took cash from my wallet, I ignored it. When he landed in prison, I bailed him out. When he couldn't come home, I searched the seedy parts of town where the junkies and sex workers hung out. I could not carve myself loose from codependency. Finally, when my heart ended up being as heavy as a block of marble and my spirit as broken as shattered glass, I had to admit that I needed help. When a friend suggested a 12-step program for loved ones, I decided to give it a shot. Cutting loose. The program's tools helped shape my recovery. I had to abandon my rock-solid belief that I could solve my child. I needed to learn how to remove. But removing felt counterproductive. Aren't parents or caretakers accountable for nurturing and safeguarding their kids? It's configured into our DNA, especially for moms. Since control is a major stumbling block, program meetings begin with the calmness prayer. God, give me the calmness to accept the things I cannot change. Not surprisingly, the first of the 12 steps included confessing that we were helpless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. As a matter of fact, the first 3 steps handle abandoning our self-will and handing it over to a kind-hearted higher power. The slogan, "Release, let God," underscores this need to relinquish control. Or as my friend Mary says, we need to keep our spoon in our own bowls. My sponsor usually reminds me that each time I action in to look after my son's business, I deprive him of the chance to achieve something and feel good about it. Removing with love. Control is a main problem in addiction. It's a huge deal for addicts and their loved ones. Addicts convince themselves that they can control their use. Enjoyed ones convince themselves that they can control the addict. When making it possible for fails, as it usually does, loved ones face tough choices. Continue the craziness, let go totally, detach. However, how? For me, separating with love isn't the same as tough love. Difficult love is a rigid approach with stringent, unconditional rules for inappropriate behavior. If you take from me one more time, I'm kicking you out of the house. Since loving someone with a substance abuse disorder is grueling, turning our backs on our loved ones can seem warranted. That is the method administered by the media and shows on intervention. By contrast, separating with love is less extreme and more flexible. We don't step in and take real responsibility for our loved one's conduct. They should handle the natural repercussions of that conduct. But we do learn how to make sensible choices rather than respond out of anxiety, fear, and anger. Early on in my healing program, I was introduced to the slogan, "Separate with love." While I grasped it intellectually, I couldn't let go mentally. As I found out more, I came to accept dependency as a disease that hijacks the brain. It can be jailed but not treated. This helped me develop compassion toward my son and recognize that my repairing was fear-based. I needed to learn how to take care of myself and navigate that thin line between helping and allowing. Is this good for me? Can I live with the result of my choice? What are my intentions? What are my choices? Is this a sensible choice? It took me a very long time to slow down and not jump in to solve things. Now, when my child runs into an issue, I listen rather than offering unsolicited guidance. I do not act impulsively. I take time to think. Usually, I will say, "Let me think of this and I'm going to get back to you." Or, if we disagree, I don't argue. A simple, "You may be right," helps problem quarrels. The mottos "think" and "listen and learn" have become invaluable. So does the cliché, "mind your own business," as does a good sense of humor. Cultivating compassion and removing with love have been necessary tools in my healing. They have actually helped me sculpt my way to freedom. Unlike Michelangelo's prisoners, I no longer feel trapped in codependency. I'm free to decide on how to live. This has been Codependency, the psychology of polarity, complementarity, enabling, and attachment. Written by Gregory Haynes. Narrated by Sarah Margrave. Codependency: control, love, addiction, and narcissism. Written by Gregory Haynes. Narrated by Sarah Margrave. Table of Contents. Chapter 1. Are you codependent or just a caring person? Chapter 2. How narcissists start abusive, codependent relationships. Chapter 3. Info on confidence, love, addiction, and codependence. Chapter 4. Codependence, control, and witness consciousness. Chapter 5. Codependent dynamics and the myth of getting what you want. Chapter 6. Narcissists guarantee you everything, but they fail to provide. Chapter 7. The 6 significant qualities of codependence. Chapter 8. How some trauma lives on after the abuse ends. Chapter 9. How to love the one that you are with. The word codependency, ignoring our own wishes in order to serve others or gain approval, has gotten in the mainstream vocabulary. The concept progressed from the term co-alcoholic, which describes an alcoholic partner's passive, making it possible for habits, while neglecting to recognize how they're being impacted and not affirming their own needs and limitations. At the heart of codependency is reacting immediately to other people's real or envisioned needs, while bypassing our own inner life. Signpost of possible codependent patterns. Are you often stressed that your partner might get upset or leave you if you don't adhere to what they want, which leaves you trapped? Is it hard to set boundaries, noticing, honoring, and expressing views and needs that may differ from others? Do other people's needs quickly surpass yours? Do you think it is challenging to pause and consider your own feelings and desires, including your yes, your no, and your perhaps, before responding to others? Do you see yourself feeling resentful and depleted just because you usually respond to what others want from you without considering what you really need? If any of the above are true, you might be inclined to minimize your own needs and put others ahead of yourself as a way to handle your desire for connection, belonging, or self-regard. But remember that life is complex. Do not be too fast to label yourself as codependent. Using a pathological label to define yourself could be an injustice. The fine line between caring and codependency. There's a fine line between being loving and codependent. If we slap the codependent label on our kind, empathetic impulses, then we may also dismiss all the great spiritual teachers, like Jesus and the Buddha, as hopeless codependents. Our impulse to be kind and responsive may be coming from a humanistic or spiritual place inside of us. It takes discernment to differentiate codependence from fundamental human caring and compassion. We human beings have a need not only to be loved, but also to really love. It usually feels nurturing and rewarding to care about others, and it's challenging to reason that the world could use a little more sensitivity and empathy. The ones with narcissistic tendencies may find a sort of reassuring self-protection in the term codependence, translating their own self-indulgent conduct as very well non-codependent. It might trigger embarrassment to be perceived as weak, soft, or tender. They might be quite quick to shame others as being codependent, while seeing themselves as commendably strong and independent. A ridicule for empathy and empathy may actually make them counter-dependent, which is the opposite extreme of codependent. Fearing attachment, intimacy, and vulnerability, they live behind a well-defended wall that ensures their isolation, usually even if they appear lively or charming. One factor of love is seeing what other people need and, if we can, give it to them. We extend ourselves without overextending. Our caring lives in dynamic balance with caring about ourselves. We enjoy the fulfillment of being responsive to other people's needs, while also being attentive to our own. Casually tossing around the codependent label may neglect how we are complex beings driven by multiple motivations. If we overlook ourselves in favor of taking care of others, we do a disservice to ourselves. But clinging too securely to our self-reliance, or being too alert about steering clear of codependence, we could keep away from the interdependence that enables healthy intimacy and connection. Psychotherapy can be a beneficial way to become more mindful about our motivations and behavior, and find a smart balance between caring about ourselves and being kind to others. Chapter 1. Are you codependent or just a caring person? The word codependency, ignoring our own wishes in order to serve others or gain approval, has gotten in the mainstream vocabulary. The concept progressed from the term co-alcoholic, which describes an alcoholic partner's passive, making it possible for habits, while neglecting to recognize how they're being impacted and not affirming their own needs and limitations. At the heart of codependency is reacting immediately to other people's real or envisioned needs, while bypassing our own inner life. Signpost of possible codependent patterns. Are you often stressed that your partner might get upset or leave you if you don't adhere to what they want, which leaves you trapped? Is it hard to set boundaries, noticing, honoring, and expressing views and needs that may differ from others? Do other people's needs quickly surpass yours? Do you think it is challenging to pause and consider your own feelings and desires, including your yes, your no, and your perhaps, before responding to others? Do you see yourself feeling resentful and depleted just because you usually respond to what others want from you without considering what you really need? If any of the above are true, you might be inclined to minimize your own needs and put others ahead of yourself as a way to handle your desire for connection, belonging, or self-regard. But remember that life is complex. Do not be too fast to label yourself as codependent. Using a pathological label to define yourself could be an injustice. The fine line between caring and codependency. There's a fine line between being loving and codependent. If we slap the codependent label on our kind, empathetic impulses, then we may also dismiss all the great spiritual teachers, like Jesus and the Buddha, as hopeless codependents. Our impulse to be kind and responsive may be coming from a humanistic or spiritual place inside of us. It takes discernment to differentiate codependence from fundamental human caring and compassion. We human beings have a need not only to be loved, but also to really love. It usually feels nurturing and rewarding to care about others, and it's challenging to reason that the world could use a little more sensitivity and empathy. The ones with narcissistic tendencies may find a sort of reassuring self-protection in the term codependence, translating their own self-indulgent conduct as very well non-codependent. It might trigger embarrassment to be perceived as weak, soft, or tender. They might be quite quick to shame others as being codependent, while seeing themselves as commendably strong and independent. A ridicule for empathy and empathy may actually make them counter-dependent, which is the opposite extreme of codependent. Fearing attachment, intimacy, and vulnerability, they live behind a well-defended wall that ensures their isolation, usually even if they appear lively or charming. One factor of love is seeing what other people need and, if we can, give it to them. We extend ourselves without overextending. Our caring lives in dynamic balance with caring about ourselves. We enjoy the fulfillment of being responsive to other people's needs, while also being attentive to our own. Casually tossing around the codependent label may neglect how we are complex beings driven by multiple motivations. If we overlook ourselves in favor of taking care of others, we do a disservice to ourselves. But clinging too securely to our self-reliance, or being too alert about steering clear of codependence, we could keep away from the interdependence that enables healthy intimacy and connection. Psychotherapy can be a beneficial way to become more mindful about our motivations and behavior, and find a smart balance between caring about ourselves and being kind to others. Chapter 2. How Narcissists Start Abusive, Codependent Relationships. The Mayo Clinic Research Group defines narcissistic personality disorder as a mental illness in which people have an inflated sense of their own significance and a deep need for affection. Those with narcissistic personality disorder believe that they're superior to others and have little regard for other people's feelings. But behind this mask of ultra-confidence lies a vulnerable self-esteem susceptible to the smallest criticism. The Oxford Dictionary defines codependency as extreme emotional or psychological reliance on a partner. Some narcissists actually like attracting codependent relationships. They focus on potential customers who may be innocent and unwary, are going through difficult times, are having a problem with self-confidence, or have other vulnerabilities, and come to their rescue like a knight in shining armor or an attracting temptress. The moment the targeted victim accepts the rescue, a dependent or codependent relationship is formed, with a variation in power between the rescuer and the rescuee. Soon, the narcissist may reveal his or her true colors by positioning ever-increasing demands and judgments on the victim, while claiming, "I've done everything for you, and you're so thankless." He or she keeps the victim in line with routine abuses verbally, mentally, and sometimes physically or sexually. The narcissist might hold the victim hostage mentally, gaslighting, materially, and/or financially, constantly shaming the victim for his or her inadequacies, threatening to leave the relationship if the victim does not fall in line and need being catered to his each impulse. This kind of narcissistic relationship is the extremely definition of mental abuse. Different studies have linked narcissism to adultery, domestic violence, and sexual addiction. Below are 3 types of codependent narcissistic cycles with recommendations to my books: How to Successfully Handle Narcissists and How to Successfully Manage Gaslighters. The Codependent Enabling Narcissistic Cycle. Initial charm, increasing criticism and abuse, contrition and apology, restitution and allurements to win the victim back, repeat pattern. The Codependent Coercive Narcissistic Cycle. Initial charm, increasing criticism and abuse, browbeating, threaten to withhold psychological, physical, sexual, material, or financial support, gain compliance through duress, quick period of calm, repeat pattern. The Codependent Guilt-Beating Narcissistic Cycle. Initial charm, increasing criticism and abuse, proclaim dissatisfaction and blaming the victim. "I have done so much for you, and this is what I get in return." Gaining compliance through eliciting partner's guilt, brief period of conciliation, repeat pattern. What all 3 codependent narcissistic cycles have in common is that, in each case, the victim is enabling her or his partner's narcissistic supply, while the narcissist is making it possible for the victim's codependency or victimhood. Can a narcissist become a better person? Maybe. However, only if she or he is highly mindful and ready to go through the bold process of self-discovery. For narcissists no longer going to play the charade at the cost of real relationships and reliability, there are ways to free from fallacy and progressively approach an individual's higher self. For the ones that live or work with narcissists, observant awareness and assertive communication are must for establishing healthy and equally considerate relationships. Chapter 3. Info on confidence, love, addiction, and codependence. Evolutionary psychology generally focuses in which life's age-old pursuit of natural reproductive success shapes our mind's activities. Advancement and conduct are related in another way also. Evolutionary epidemiologists, like me, have an interest in how the mind's activities are development by other means. We compare and contrast the mind's experimentation processes with nature's. Today, I want to give you an example of our work that provides insight into such hot personal topics as self-esteem, love, addiction, and codependence. The first 2 of these, self-esteem and love, sound like good things, and the last 2 sound like bad ones. Evolutionary epidemiologists need to get rid of those positive and negative associations to look more neutrally at underlying procedures or dynamics. Like evolutionists or undoubtedly researchers in general, we set aside ethical questions long enough to comprehend how something happens. One efficient way to neutralize the moral questions is to find counter-examples. Here, that would mean cases where confidence and love are bad, and dependency and codependence are good. That is not hard to do. Self-esteem can make one overconfident in a bad idea. One can love terrible people and things. One can be addicted to incredibly productive activities. I'm addicted to blogging here, in case you have not observed. I like this addiction. It keeps me writing. Codependence, dependence on someone who is reciprocally dependent on you, is not always horrible. It's also what makes collaborations, communities, societies, and the world work. Let's leave self-esteem until the end to talk about love, addiction, and codependence. Connotations aside, they have a lot in common. Here's a biological example to show a commonality. We really need to eat vitamin C. Other mammals do not. You don't need to give your cat or pet dog orange juice, do you? What's up with that? Other mammals produce their own vitamin C. Geneticists have recognized genes that are responsible for this ability. We have the genes too, but in us, they're harmed past performance. Geneticists are positive we used to grow our own vitamin C, yet now we can't. What took place? Long ago, our forefathers found their ways into trees where fruit was plentiful. They ate the fruit for the calories, but while doing so, got the vitamin C. What the genes had provided the environment began supplying also. With this new reputable external source, our ancestors had two sources of vitamin C. You have actually probably heard of self-centered gene theory. This is lazy gene theory. If a gene has no impact on survival, then the organisms with it will endure even if the gene alters. And genes do mutate as they pass from generation to generation. That is what happened to our vitamin C genes. Once fruit was available, the genes had no influence on survival. They just built up mistakes until they did not work. It's more sloppy than lazy, but if we're to anthropomorphize, it is fine to imagine genes as not troubling to show up for work when their environment has the job covered. And now we are addicted to this external source of vitamin C. We really love it, meaning we will go out of our way to get external vitamin C. Our dependency on it constrains and forms our behavior. Fruit loves us also. Not mentally, of course, but in the sense that fruit's dissemination and survival relies on it being eaten by us. We assist in seed circulation. It assists in the avoidance of scurvy. You could say we are addicted to each other, or codependent. Is it an advantage or a bad thing? I don't know. That is not the point here, though. I will say I do like a very good grapefruit. I bring up vitamin C to highlight a general pattern in how life collects associations and collaborations, addictions, really love relationships, and codependencies. Codependency might be the most detailed of these. Two systems, in my example, primates and fruit, come to rely on each other for their particular survival. A grapefruit addiction is more secure than a morphine dependency, but the process by which they come about have a lot in common. Although our addiction to external vitamin C evolved over generations and a morphine dependency evolves in one lifetime, they both develop because an external source of something becomes available. You should lose it or use it. Since the internal source is thus no longer necessary, it disappears. When morphine is reliably readily available, the body downregulates the production of endorphins, endo meaning internal, so internal morphine. When fresh fruit is readily available, the genome stops producing functioning genes for vitamin C endosynthesis. Exact same difference. And such distinctions propagate other distinctions. The morphine addict starts stealing cash to support his habit, his reliance on an external source. Primates acquire color vision to support their habit, their reliance on an external source. Color vision allowed our ancestors to see the difference between ripe and unripe fruit. Okay, now a fast parallel to the dynamics of self-esteem. In my last post, I discussed the ways in which self-esteem drops when you lose your job, a partner, or when otherwise the crowd that used to occupy your day thins or vanishes. Yeah, your self-confidence drops if you are turned down, but it's not just that. We become dependent on the people around us to remind us of our focus, what we are and are not doing. If they are not around, and it's simple to lose focus. When they are around, our own self-confidence and self-directedness tends to atrophy a bit. Just like the self-starter nature of vitamin C production atrophies over generations in the presence of fruit, or the self-starter nature of endorphin productions can atrophy in the presence of morphine, so too can the self-starter nature of confidence atrophy in the presence of lots of social affirmation. So what happens when we go cold turkey? Unlike the vitamin C gene, which will never ever sit back into production, must I lose my grapefruit connection, someone's auto-generated self-confidence can kick back in. It may take a while. It takes the body up to 6 months to get back into full production of endorphins if one cold turkeys on morphine. And being a self-starter after you've lost your job could take that long for some of us as well. One last connection. Are people more independent nowadays than in past generations? The majority of us intuit that we are. We think of ourselves as much freer, but a lot of that is a product of how reliably our reliance on our environment is gratified. Lose your job, lose your web service, gas stations, police and fire department, grocery stores, mobile phone networks, the cold turkey would be intense. We're more in love with, addicted to, and codependent on external sources than ever. Chapter 4. Codependence, Control, and Witness Consciousness. An aspect of the codependent system that's typically overlooked is described as agency. Company is the misbegotten perception that our actions can impact and control the behavior of others. One specifically treacherous example of agency is when it manifests in relationship to relationship, when we try to push a present relationship into the mold of a stereotypical complex in a misguided and rather useless effort to fix that past relationship. Jack grew up in an environment where, no matter what he did, he was given the message that it was not good enough. As he developed, the macabre sense of less than and insecurity that this reproduced manifested in several different ways. On the one hand, Jack was an overachiever, exceeding all standards of typical and normally even exceptional in everything to which he put his hand. Though he couldn't see it, he ended up being a quite complex and rather remarkable person. On the disadvantage, he had a tendency to overcompensate through a propensity towards self-inflation and conceit, overt self and other deceit, and an effort to be all things to all people. In regards to relationships, Jack tended to choose circumstances that mimicked his parenting experience, and then impose himself on the relationship in such a way as to control it, wrenching it into something it wasn't, so that he could play out a repaired dream about what his parenting experience should have looked a lot like. Sounds like Jack's got problems, right? Well, not so much. Jack's experience and his reaction to that experience, while special to him, at a meta level is fairly common. His is a perfect example of agency and the failure of witness awareness. The witness is she who sees all. It is the non-attached, non-judgmental observer that isn't bound by ego. On a less esoteric and more accessible note, witness may be described as goal ego or our own personal watcher. Agency is about control and the exercise of control in relationships. Witness awareness is all about passive global observation. When we try to control something, we are attempting to push it into a mold of our choosing, rather than seeing it in its entirety for what it is and reacting to that, rather than responding to our own needs. Reacting, rather than responding, is the failure of witness awareness. It leads us down a course where we will never ever get our needs met just because one can't get something to do what it's not going to do by itself. For Jack's part, It was in some way more productive for him to revisit the pain and solitude of his youth, trying fruitless to solve something from the past that could not be repaired in the moment, instead of seeing, or witnessing, the entire picture and recognizing how his stereotypical complex was playing out in that picture. Had he done that, he would have had the ability to withdraw his own neurosis from the present situation and take part in the relationship more authentically. Paradoxically, withdrawing his neurosis from his current relationship would likely have led to its death instead of perpetuate it, because the way of his participation was reflected and complemented by his partner's needs. If he came at the relationship without that neurotic system in place, the relationship wouldn't work because, with his neurosis out of the way, his partner's neurosis would have no one to have fun with. That's where the codependence piece comes in. The role of witness awareness is seeing the entire picture. It is recognizing what it is in us that prompts us to make the choices that we make. With that in hand, we can then see how the tendency to those choices plays out, whether productively or unproductively, in our relationships. As long as we stay trapped in a system of agency, attempting to control our world through the imposition of our actions, we live in a state of inauthenticity. That is just because we are not in a relationship, but once gotten rid of, in a relationship to a relationship, and that relationship is one that is long past. The only means for repairing this is to backtrack into the archetypal complex and addressing the problems and feelings connected to that relationship, because we aren't going to solve the past in the here and now. If Jack chose to confront the feelings, all the emotions, connected with his parenting and not deny the existence of any, he would then be able to resolve those feelings, integrating them into his perception of himself and transforming his expectations. Succeeding in this, his role in relationship would then become one of just being, both literally and metaphysically, in the relationship. He would no longer have to impose himself, inflate himself, live in a state of emotional denial or self or other deceit, but he would only need to appear. Credibility in relationship means existing, and existing means tearing aside the veil to witness ourselves, our weak points and our strengths, and how those things play out in the world, in their totality. Chapter 5. Codependent Dynamics and the Myth of Getting What You Want. Why do we believe that, in divorce, our ex-husband will be a better father than he was in marriage? Or, if we have a real need to deal with an affair as a real relationship, our lover will do the exact same? Or, if our ex-spouse was controlling within the setting of marriage, he or she will be changed into the picture of altruism as an ex-spouse. More importantly, why do we fail to recognize that people are, by and big constant, and after that, run headlong into the neurotic behavior that perpetuates the frustration of such relationships for us? Exercising the intrinsic desire that people act in a specific method order for us to get our needs met is the psychological equivalent of squeezing a dry sponge. Even the most progressed of us operate from some position of egoism, at some point even narcissism, they're different, an agenda that precludes agency over the behavior of others. Agency is the misperception within a codependent dynamic that defines our belief that we can control the behavior of others through our own actions. This myth of controlling others is concurrent with the myth of managing feelings. We can't control the manner in which others act any more than we can control what or how they think and feel by virtue of what we do. Any idea to the contrary is simply grist for the crazy-making mill. Backtracking a bit, it is very important to take note of the fact that codependency is not so bad. All relationships, by their very nature, are codependent. It's when one partner in a relationship begins to misshape themselves or their behavior to give themselves away, so to speak, that this naturally happening and needed codependence starts down the road of pathology. We all engage in some degree of agency. It's a common aspect of the human condition. By and large, rather than out of control, These are just what we might consider social suggestions. Challenges appear when the idea isn't followed. Pathology arises when the person being ignored starts tossing themselves against the wall in an effort to make that tip, or, at that point, more likely instruction, happen. Absolutely nowhere is this more evident than within the framework of relationships. Gender-based and stylistic differences make these ripe for precisely this sort of tension. One partner, normally the more archetypally manly, enters into a relationship at a basically physical level. The other partner, normally the archetypally feminine, participates in the relationship at a fundamentally psychological level. That goes to the concept that the manly archetype tends to be a physical first and psychological second, while the womanly archetype tends to be emotional first and physical second. The relationship escalates, and when one partner starts requesting for more, essentially asking that the shape of the relationship change in order that their socio-emotional needs are met, things begin to get complex. There are 3 people in any relationship: the 2 partners and their relationship. There are also 3 relationships in any relationship: the relationship of the 2 partners to each other, which creates the main relationship, and the relationship of each partner to the relationship. So, when the relationship of one partner to the relationship as an entire changes, but the other partner's doesn't, will not, or cannot, that first partner is open to a world of disappointment and psychological chaos. The degree of that turmoil is what we volunteer for. Squeezing a dry sponge is the failure to recognize that. Although the circumstances of a relationship could have changed or somebody's relationship to the relationship may have changed, the system as a whole hasn't moved. The neurosis comes in attempting to force it to shift. The pathology comes when that need morphs itself into unreasonable anxiety, a collapse of reasonable social boundaries, clinging, neediness, manic texting or emailing, co-opting others to leverage our intents, etc. This acting out of character might even be behavior that, in its extreme, could be characterized as pseudo-borderline in element. What this all comes down to is a care to make an effort to understand the nature of a relationship and balancing what may be lost and egoistic need against the reality of the situation. We might want our partner to be different within the context of a shifting landscape, but what we want and what we're going to get could not compare. The key to sanity here is understanding and accepting the limits of the relationship, and after that, deciding if that is somewhere that we wish to be. Chapter 6. Narcissists guarantee you everything, but they fail to provide. Narcissists, who are especially efficient at winning the love and appreciation of others, could also leave a path of broken relationships behind them once they have been discovered. A narcissist wants new conquests to believe that it was he or she who had been the victim or the injured party in any former breakups. They will lavishly embellish their own good qualities as they enthusiastically damn their exes. Narcissists need friendships until relationships get real. Being a narcissist sidekick isn't a lot of fun either. It is tiring when you need to play the role of sycophant or superfan whenever you're together. Narcissists do not comprehend that relationships aren't built on master-lackey or superstar-superfan models. They cannot like or master the relaxed, natural flow of give-and-take interactions that are particular of authentic relationships. It's not that a narcissist wants to push away potential good friends. In fact, she might not even understand what she's doing. Narcissists often expect their good friends to be willing to shine the spotlight on the narcissist, no matter how excellent their own efficiency or personality may be. The primary job of a narcissist good friend is to make everybody else think that the narcissist looks good, even if the narcissist actually doesn't. It needs good friends to learn how to stuff down their own need for recognition or attention to keep the light shining on their narcissistic good friend. It is definitely typical for friends to grow weary of this level of responsibility in the friendship. Narcissists are loyal only to themselves. Narcissists have trouble keeping genuine relationships with partners or good friends. To actively engage in a genuine relationship needs that one has the ability to pull down somebody's guard and be open and honest. Narcissists are frightened of being seen as imperfect, as that would crack open the image that they try to forecast as superhuman. True narcissists, not just those with some narcissistic qualities, are highly unlikely to have typical, relaxed, give-and-take relationships because many people wouldn't have the stamina needed to continuously pump up the ego of their narcissist good friend. Narcissists suck a lot of energy out of the people who try to befriend them. Enough appreciation is never enough. Long-term diagnosis of a relationship with a narcissist. In healthy relationships, people make room for a partner's errors. Nevertheless, when you're included with the narcissist, the blame for any bump in the roadway or misconception falls on you. Narcissists are not able to accept ownership or responsibility for any relational problems or personal issues. Narcissists blame others for their own failings. Their ego is so fragile that they can't tolerate any danger to their self-esteem. Romantic partners of narcissists run the risk of beginning to accept that they are less than their partners and could start to belittle themselves and accept a partner's criticisms as being worthy of, whether it really is or not. The narcissist and the codependent partner. Regretfully, the people who want to stay in relationships with narcissists are most likely in codependent, not interdependent, relationships with their partners. Narcissists really need partners whom they feel work as positive reflections on themselves. They yearn for power over partners in a range of ways. These might include what a partner is wearing, how a partner speaks, who a partner hangs out with, and so forth. As narcissists tighten control over a partner's self-expression, their partners might start to push back, and this is when narcissists lose their cool and their fear takes hold. The relationship might become a yo-yo. The partner tries to get some distance, but is sucked back into the old patterns. That can go on till the narcissist wearies of the partner, or the partner no longer serves his needs. If you feel that you've been drawn into a relationship with a narcissist, you could want to create some precise personal boundaries. Take time to objectively observe your interactions with your partner and determine whether or not the relationship is meeting your needs, not just those of your partner. Chapter 7. The 6 Significant Qualities of Codependence. I frequently get questions from people who are upset that friends or relatives have branded them as codependent. They wish to know if I think they're codependent. As I've said in earlier posts, there isn't exactly agreement about what codependence is, and some people specify it is so broadly almost anyone can be classified as codependent. But there are some hallmarks of codependency that are agreed upon by many therapists. Basically, you could be codependent if you have an excessive and unhealthy tendency to rescue and take real responsibility for others, get a sense of purpose and improve your self-esteem through severe self-sacrifice to satisfy the needs of others, choose to enter and stay in long, high-cost caretaking and saving relationships, in spite of the expenses to you or others. Regularly try to craft the change of struggling, addicted, or under-functioning people whose problems are far larger than your abilities to solve them. Seem to attract low-functioning people looking for someone to take care of them so they can avoid adult responsibility or effects, or attract people in perpetual crisis reluctant to change their lives. Have a pattern of engaging in well-intentioned but ultimately ineffective, unhealthy helping habits, like allowing. Thinking of your childhood may also supply some clues simply because codependence generally has roots in youth. This is an example. As children, many codependent people needed to suppress their own wishes and needs to win the approval of a challenging, unstable, or addicted parent. Needing to look after an addicted or emotionally distressed parent or other adult duties at a young age, parentification, is also related to adult codependence. Children with manipulative parents or caretakers who convince them to accept abuse or extreme control as love could be in danger for codependent relationships with tough takers. This makes sense when you think about it. After all, the parent-child relationship is our first love relationship, and it sets the stage for our later close relationships. Many codependent people grow up with a codependent role model who selflessly sacrificed on behalf of under-functioning others. To them, codependent relationships are typical and routine. Automatically, they learn unhealthy helping behavioral scripts that they enact automatically. If you have read my book, or some of my earlier posts on the subject, you know that I recommend caution before adopting the codependent label. Too frequently, the codependent label is slapped onto anybody, specifically women, in a violent or exploitive relationship, along with other labels like reliant character, self-defeating character, or borderline character. However, codependence is not the only reason we can end up in such relationships, nor is it the only reason we at times stay. And although people in codependent relationships have some power to set limits and leave such relationships, the truth is that codependent relationships often involve tough circumstances with annoying people that make complex boundary setting. If you think you are in a codependent relationship or that you're codependent, there's hope in the form of treatment, self-help, and support groups. A therapist can help you trace the roots of your codependence and help you set limits and choose much healthier relationships. Chapter 8. How some trauma lives on after the abuse ends. Codependency robs us of a self and of self-love. We have learned to conceal who we truly are because we grew up pleasing, rebelling against, or withdrawing from inefficient parents. This sets us up for trauma. As grown-ups, even if we achieve success in some areas, our emotional life isn't simple. Searching for security and love, most of us struggle to enter or out of relationships. We could stay in dissatisfied or abusive relationships or try to make uncomfortable ones work. Many of us would be content just to find a reprieve from continuous anxiety or depression. Trauma after ending an abusive relationship. Even so, leaving a relationship isn't the end of our problems. After at first rejoicing and enjoying newfound liberty, there's often grief, remorse, and sometimes guilt. We may still really love the really person whom we are grateful we left. We might no longer talk to separated friends or relatives, and even kids we still really love or worry about. Those are unanticipated losses to be embraced. Going no contact does not always end the pain either. The trauma of abuse isn't over. Our self-esteem has undoubtedly suffered. We may lack confidence or feel unsightly. Abuse might continue in a new relationship, or by members of the family, by an ex with whom we co-parent, or through kids who've been damaged or weaponized. As hard as it was to separate an abusive relationship, it might still haunt us, at times even after the abuser is dead. One day, usually decades later, we may learn that we have trauma, PTSD. Trauma scars from the abuse we thought we'd left behind. We may have nightmares and become risk-averse or hesitant to really love again. It's difficult to leave for good. Afraid of re-experiencing abuse, abandonment, or loss of our autonomy, many codependents end up being counter-dependent, though our incapability to be alone and or self-confidence can trigger us to again make poor choices. Out of fear, we might choose someone safe who isn't right for us and to whom we'd never ever commit. But regardless of our intents, we nevertheless reattach and find it tough to leave. We do not trust ourselves and contemplate whether the problem lies with us or our partner. And although we have promised to never ever again let anyone abuse us, some of us may again be betrayed, deserted, or maltreated in ways that we hadn't expected. We have to let go all over again. This cycle of desertion can make us fearful of intimacy. If we choose being alone, our needs for love and nearness go unmet. Loneliness can trigger poisonous shame from youth when we felt alone and unloved or unlovable. It might look like there is no hope or escape from our misfortune. The core of codependency. We didn't expect that after coming out of denial, courageously setting limits, and leaving unhealthy or violent relationships, we would then need to face the core of codependency. Our codependent signs have been coping systems that masked our standard obstacle: how to fill our empty space and solitude with self-love. In part, this reflects the human condition. But for codependents, these feelings are connected to trauma. Our insecurity, self-alienation, and lack of self-love and self-nurturing skills fuel addicting relationships and routines that trigger us repeating emotional pain. Real healing. Just as addicts turn to an addiction to keep from unpleasant feelings, so do codependents distract and lose themselves by concentrating on others or a relationship as sources of well-being. If we stop doing that, typically not by choice, but as a result of seclusion or rejection, we might reveal depression and feelings of solitude and emptiness that we've been keeping away from all along. We keep recycling our codependency till we address our deepest pain. Healing requires we turn our attention inward and learn to become our own buddy, because our relationship with ourselves is the design template for all our relationships. With some insight, we find that we are quite self-critical and haven't been treating ourselves kindly with self-compassion. Actually, we've been abusing ourselves all along. That is actually a favorable revelation. Our objective is clear: learn how to associate with ourselves in a healthier way. Our jobs are to renew our connection to our internal hints, our guidance system, to trust ourselves. Identify and honor our needs and emotions. Nurture and comfort ourselves. Meet our needs. Recover our shame and verify our genuine self. Take responsibility for our pain, safety, and satisfaction. Chapter 9. How to love the one that you are with. We, as human beings, are perhaps unique among all species for the intricacy of the process by which we select a mate. True, male pufferfish make each effort to impress women by constructing sophisticated, flower-shaped nests on the sandy seafloor. Male Victoria riflebirds perform balance dances to best flaunt their flashing blue feathers. And female Tungara frogs, who value bulk in a mate, look for males with the deepest, most sonorous croak. But while these behaviors may be complex, the systems are fairly simple. Females judge males on their nest-building ability, their dancing, or their croaks, but don't tend to have a long wish list of must-haves in a partner. Human beings, however, differ in our preferences and are susceptible to compromise one preferable trait against another. You might want a physically appealing partner, but also someone who is sincere, dependable, ambitious, kind, generous, and the list goes on. No one, other than Ryan Gosling, can hope to score a best 10 in every classification. This is exactly why the majority of us must decide if the constellation of traits had by each prospective partner meets the grade. Maybe John is high up on sex appeal, but short on earning potential, while Sam is wealthy, but appears like a foot. Some might find that a very tough choice, and many research studies have attempted to examine how and why people trade one characteristic off against another. Further complicating the matter is an important question just recently positioned by Gül Günaydın of Bilkent University in Ankara, Turkey. She and her co-workers realized that in all of the existing research studies, volunteers had been tasked with picking between two alternative partners who were new. But, she asked, what if one of the options is the current partner? Of course, This is very likely to be an important question that tons of us who have a long-lasting partner grapple with typically. Just because an individual has a partner does not mean that they close their eyes to all alternatives. Choosing a partner isn't a one-off decision, but a continuous process identified by repeated decisions to either stick to the relationship or to leap ship for a person new. Stick or twist. In a series of experiments, Gunyaden had her research volunteers envision they were in this situation. They had been in a relationship for 3 months, but just recently were introduced to a new person. This individual was compared with the current partner and defined either as more trustworthy but less appealing, or less trustworthy but more attractive. Would the volunteer consider ditching their current partner for their new alternative? Yes or no? Other volunteers had to choose between partners differing in beauty and wealth, or wealth and reliability. A control group of volunteers were asked to imagine that they were single, but otherwise the task was the same: to choose between 2 potential partners. The results of this experiment revealed that partnered volunteers erred towards sticking to their current partners. That is, if the partner was appealing but untrustworthy, the volunteer overvalued attractiveness. If the partner was trustworthy but unappealing, the volunteer overvalued reliability. So, our preference for the status quo appears to be more powerful than our preferences for any particular quality. We can trade one wanted quality off against another, but are also brought along by inertia. It is much easier to stick to your current partner, even if he or she is imaginary. Festival of Deception. But what if this effect only emerges when the situation is theoretical? To check whether status quo preferences continue under more naturalistic conditions, Gunyaden set up another experiment. That one was more fun, because it included tricking the volunteers, which we should not begrudge psychologists, because it's basically the only thing they enjoy doing. Gunyaden welcomed each female volunteer to the laboratory one at a time. Each woman was told she would be taking part in an experiment about decision-making in interpersonal relationships. They would make a series of decisions in concert with another volunteer, a man, whom they would meet for a short time. Half of the female volunteers would be arbitrarily allocated a male partner, but the other half would read profiles of different guys and get to choose which one they preferred to engage with. In reality, the experiment wasn't about decision-making in social relationships, and all of the women got to choose which man they chose to talk with. Their profiles also were fake and had been written by the researchers. Each woman was given 3 printed profiles. 2 defined horrible guys, whom few would be likely to choose, but the third man had good points and bad, and was almost always chosen. After the volunteer had chosen her favored man, she handed the papers back to the research assistant. The research assistant then said, "Sorry. Oh no, did I give you 3 profiles earlier? There should have been another." They would then go get a 4th profile for the volunteer to consider. And, you thought it, the man defined in this new profile was the reverse of the previously chosen man. If the volunteer had chosen to talk to a wealthy but unreliable man, the new man was poor but reliable, and vice versa. Would the volunteer stick to the man they had chosen first, or would they switch to the new man? The results showed that people were more likely to stick to the man that they had chosen first, even though in this instance, the dedication had lasted a bit more than a minute or 2. Gunyaden and her coworkers really wonder whether people would still prefer the status quo if they experienced potential partners in the flesh. Future research is needed to address this question. They also conclude that their results suggest that mate choice can't be considered a completely reasonable process, since a rational process would involve weighing the better or most preferred characteristic more highly, despite of whether the trait is had by a new or established partner. However, they also acknowledge that, across several domains, people dislike to lose more than we love to get so-called loss hostility. Mate choice could not be unique. We prefer the status quo typically. One benefit of this preference may be that it keeps our relationships intact. If we changed our love every time we met somebody who surpassed our partners on one characteristic, a lot of our relationships would be very short indeed. This has been Codependency, Control, Love, Addiction, and Narcissism. Written by Gregory Haynes. Narrated by Sarah Margrave. Codependency. Signs of codependent relationships and relationship traps. Written by Gregory Haynes. Narrated by Sarah Margrave. Table of Contents. Chapter 1. What you may not know about codependency. Chapter 2. Signs of counterdependency. Chapter 3. Do codependents make the very best or worst workers? Chapter 4. How to escape the trap. Chapter 5. Why codependents stay in damaging relationships. Chapter 6. Some relationships are based upon control. Chapter 7. Codependent or simply reliant. Chapter 1. What you may not know about codependency. The principle of codependency has its beginnings in the addiction healing movement, treating the enabler of those addicted to alcohol or drugs. The term is described as a set of manipulative compulsive habits identified by lack of self-confidence, poor limits, and obsessive control. Sometimes, codependency is specified as a dependency to a person. Those habits are learned to make it through in a family experiencing great psychological pain. The behaviors are passed from generation to generation and lead to a diminished capability to participate in loving relationships. Overgiving gets us into trouble. Being in service is a lovely thing. While being of service in our families and work environment, we risk running into trouble if we spend too much time and attention on others, to the exemption of our own self-care. We can be so focused on other people's needs that we overlook our own. We are not negotiating for our own needs, drawing clear limits, or exercising our right to say no, and we aren't treating ourselves with the high regard that we should have. Our fear can highlight our manipulative, controlling habits. Once we admit that we are struggling with those unskillful choices, we become conscious enough to make more skillful ones. Instead of seeing codependency as a disease state psychopathology requiring years of thorough treatment, we can see it as a learning deficit. We can reframe it as a regular stage of development, which is not an issue unless we get stuck there. Codependence is an unavoidable and natural part of each relationship. Some individuals call it really love, infatuation, or commitment. There's an unconscious arrangement in a codependent relationship that you're not going to do anything to ruffle their feathers, and they are not going to do anything to ruffle ours. There's an implicit arrangement that we are going to let each other merge. In every relationship, there is a stage where we lose ourselves in the other person, which is fantastic. It's only an issue if we lose ourselves and don't get ourselves back again. We keep the do not interrupt agreement under covers as part of the early developmental stage, till it does not work for us any longer. While we recognize the toll that it is handling us is just too dear, we want to progress to the next stage of differentiation. Breaking free from codependent patterns. When the time comes to leave the stage behind, it is essential not to judge harshly when we have unstable limits, trouble saying no, and accommodating too often. It's prevalent when codependent patterns rear up for people to think, "What is wrong with me? I keep choosing the wrong people." Or, "What is wrong with him? This is a hopeless case. This relationship is total insanity." When we see what is going on that's no longer serving us, it is essential to connect to the need for change with compassion. Rather than putting ourselves down, if we can mention, "I am in the stage of the relationship where I'm up against my edge of fear to make a significant change, but I will make that change." On-the-job training is day-by-day making of more conscious choices. We will definitely save ourselves some trouble if we have an agreement with our partner that we will use what the relationship gambles to work with each other towards the objective of a fulfilling partnership. What to do if you are in a codependent relationship? Take the focus off the other and focus on yourself. Do your own work. Practice thoughtful self-care. Find an excellent counselor. Perhaps your partner will go also. Take time to be reflective, to discover your own truth. Concentrate on your personal rights. You have the right to change your mind at any time. Release the concept of being a victim. Life doesn't happen to us. We actually do have choices. The way out is to recognize the choices that we truly have. You are free to leave if you wish. Affirm that you'll survive if the relationship does not make it through the shift. You have the right to set limits, which helps set boundaries. You have the actual right to say no. Once you have limits and a sense of self, you can have real intimacy. Share your process with the ones that will support you sensitively and guide you productively. Discover more about the values that you adopted in your family of origin. Decide which ones serve you and which ones don't. Establish your existing values and live by them. Commit yourself to being as responsible for yourself as you potentially can. The addiction movement called attention to codependent patterns, which has had an advantageous influence in demonstrating couples, even those without a partner with an addiction, where they really need to grow. However, there has been some misinterpretation about healthy dependence and codependency. Understanding where our healthy dependency is working on our behalf and identifying it from codependency that lessens our wellness is each couple's challenge. We can learn to know the difference. Chapter 2: Signs of Counterdependency. A while back, the term codependency was all the rage. Classic examples of codependency involve individuals who endured various kinds of bothersome habits because they deeply fear separation and have impaired levels of autonomy. I just recently saw a treatment video of a woman dating an alcoholic. She would be his designated motorist consistently, while he got inebriated and even sometimes verbally violent. Instead of positioning a boundary and separating from him till, or unless, he changed, she would end up being upset, cry to her sweethearts, and then make excuses for him and repeat the pattern. It was a classic example of codependency. Dependence is a guaranteed problem for many folks who come into treatment. Having said that, practically as typical, but much less spoke about is the problem of counterdependency. Undoubtedly, I just recently asked my class of 6 first-year doctoral students in professional psychology, "What is counterdependency?" And none of the 6 knew the answer, which is the reason why I chose to write this post. Whereas maladapted reliance is basically about a failure to rely on oneself to manage life individually from others, counterdependency is essentially about a failure to trust others. While there are many things that contribute to counterdependency, it usually has its earliest developing roots in an insecure attachment pattern leading to the development of an avoidant attachment style. That style emerges from a misattunement between infant and caretakers, or possibly even abuse, and it is defined in the young kid as exaggerated independence and a suppressed emotional dependence on caregivers. The type in understanding counterdependency is differentiating it from healthy autonomy. Healthy independence is a state of confident self-reliance in which an individual recognizes their interdependency with others, has an agentic sense of self, a sense that one can effectively control a person's destiny, and isn't unduly controlled or influenced by others. The main specifying feature of a healthy autonomy is first that the independence motive is a technique mindset, meaning that the individual desires to be reasonably self-reliant because they want to recognize their full potential as an individual, but somebody that is all at once and securely adjoined with others. Second, healthy self-governing people can routinely form reliable, meaningful, intimate long-term relations with others. That is, they can share, be vulnerable, and are comfortable counting on others when it is sensible to do so. On the surface, counterdependency might look similar to a healthy autonomy. This is an example. Both involve the capacity to separate from others, though what drives counterdependency is an avoidance mindset, namely the avoidance of depending on others simply because of a fundamental skepticism of the repercussion of doing so. Moreover, although these people might have ostensibly positive relationships, but simply because they essentially fear intimacy and do not trust others, they don't form long-lasting deep relationships. Undoubtedly, even in a marriage relationship, a counter-reliant will hide core elements of their experience, withstand showing dependence needs, and be reluctant to open up. Instead, they will typically offer a shallow confidence and/or just separate and keep away from any time a real need or opportunity for deep psychological connection surface areas. It can be a very aggravating experience for the partner. Janae and Barry Weinhold, authors who were known for articulating codependency, have recently been writing on counterdependency, describing it as a flight from intimacy. They say that the following 7 signs point to counterdependency. Difficulty being close to others. A strong need to be right all the time. Self-indulgent and egotistical. A resistance or refusal to request for help. Expects excellence in self and others. Extreme pain appearing weak or vulnerable. Has trouble relaxing and is addicted to activities like work or exercise. I do see counterdependency propensities rather routinely. Indeed, many couples present as one person being on the dependent side, with the other adopting a more counterdependent role. It is a valuable pattern to be able to identify, either in someone's self or in others. Chapter 3. Do codependents make the very best or worst workers? Throughout her initial interview, she looked shy and nervous, but as the interview wore on, she appeared to be abnormally open and friendly, like an old friend, definitely that you have met before. She may have even brought in a cup of coffee or your favorite donuts. How could she really know that I love Cinnabon? She makes you feel so comfortable, like an old set of your favorite tennis shoes. There is an ease about her, a responsiveness to each word. She appears to like you instantly, and you find her so easy to talk with. Naturally, she is hired. She's quickly acknowledged as a super conscientious worker. Not real creative, but extensive and dependable. Does not mind doing routine jobs. Good with details. Appears to need a reasonable amount of guidance and reassurance, however, but she doesn't mind burning the midnight oil hours. Heck, she even volunteers for it. And she's always so cheery and, well, so nice. She leaves you little notes with smiley faces with chocolate kisses on them and always reminds you of your conferences and other responsibilities, even the personal ones. Seeming to expect your every need, she remembers it is your partner's birthday and reminds you to buy her a present. She will even pick it up for you on her way home if you wish. Oh, that's okay. She'll use her own money. You can reimburse her whenever. At this point in time, you find yourself asking, so who is this person and where can I find dozens of them? Though alas, the story continues. As time goes on, she appears a little silent, but she won't tell you why. She is a little brief with you and not her generally friendly self. Is it something you did? You ask her and she says no. Soon, she starts to take days off and she appears to be sick a lot. She is not rather as efficient as she once was. She appears uncommonly inept and balks at learning the new billing system. And say goodbye to Christmas gifts. She is no longer fascinated by the birthday club. No more smiley faces on the memos. Worst yet, and unbeknownst to you, she is secretly looking for another job. If you could be a fly on the wall throughout her day-to-day discussions with her sister, you would hear her grumble that she feels unappreciated at work. Nobody returned her Christmas cards. No one remembered her birthday. No one appears to really appreciate anymore that she works late. Have they just gotten used to her and are taking her for granted? Worse yet, she thinks maybe they just don't like her. Are they mad at her? Why is it that she keeps in mind everybody else's favorite coffee and spends her hard-earned money to buy it for them when they don't reciprocate? She is the hardest worker in the office, yet has not had a raise in months. They call on her when they really need her, but it is Jessica, the office flirt, who just got the most recent big promotion. Tearful and distraught, she tells her sister that she's sending her resume. Although it's difficult for the typical person to make a medical psychological diagnosis in this case, it seems likely that this individual has a reliant character style, and maybe, if the behavior is negative to the individual and others and persist, this is probably a person with reliant personality disorder. More widely referred to as codependent, this individual often seems too good to be true. And when this personality style isn't extremely severe, they really can be extraordinary employees, hardworking and loyal, true members of the business family. Yet, as we just saw, they present a special challenge to the work environment. The key to handling them successfully lies to comprehending what makes them tick. Here are some pointers. The key to handling an individual with reliant personality disorder relies upon management's consciousness of their unique gifts and flaws. Primarily, one needs to comprehend that they are in almost consistent need of approval. They seem to anticipate your each need so that you will like them. They will give you gifts, so you're going to approve of them. They will do undesirable jobs, so you'll approve of them. They will agree with you, so you'll authorize them. They will try to be the best staff member so that you'll approve of them. They are simply horrified of rejection and displeasure. They even see it when it isn't there. They will tell you what you want to hear so as to avoid conflicts, so it is hard to find out what they actually want. Underneath the pleasantness and desire to acquiesce, there's a strong need to stay away from difference. Just remember, if you disagree with them, you may not like them and for that reason will reject them. This causes their doing things they do not like, but not letting you know. Don't be afraid to question them after their submission with questions like, "However, tell me, is there anything you do not like about this?" Other tips? Try to understand that a little understanding and unique indulging go a long, long way. You are going to need to spend special time talking with them about their work. They're extremely relational. Truth be told, use them in hospitality roles, or let them order food for conferences and so on. And agreeing with her colleagues is what will make her want to stay and belong of her team. Verbal expressions of gratitude and encouragement, while valuable for all workers, are specifically important to them. Also, remember that raises and promotions, even if they're just tokens of gratitude, will keep this worker content and productive. Sometimes doing extra special things, such as tossing them a little birthday party, or giving additional time and support when training them to learn new tasks, or, even if they are just having a bad hair day, are all critical management behaviors for the reliant employee. Remember, they have a strong need to have others direct them. They are afraid to make choices of their own. They're afraid that if they do, they will be wrong. These are paint-by-the-numbers people who do not like to roam too away the beaten path. They like routine jobs, so why not give them these types of jobs to do? It is very true that, when handled with care, these folks make great and faithful workers and colleagues. You just have to know how to treat them. And after that, they can truly be the best workers. Chapter 4. How to Escape the Trap. One definition of a codependent is somebody who feels responsible for other people's emotions, problems, and habits to the exclusion of themselves. While this is not the only definition, codependents are, in general, going to sacrifice their own emotional, psychological, and physical wellness, and even security, so as to sustain their relationships and take care of their partners and members of the family. Naturally, as the saying goes, it takes two to tango. It definitely takes two to be in a relationship. And this kind of pleaser, fixer personality is the regrettable compliment for somebody who chooses the role of taker or controller. While I've spent a lot of time talking about the role codependency bets those of us who are, or have been, in relationships with addicts, people with addictions aren't the only ones who latch on to codependence, or for whom codependents sacrifice themselves. Codependents often find themselves in relationships with people who display narcissism. Narcissism often defined concerning being the reverse of codependency. A narcissist is said to be someone who is excessively involved with his or herself, who feels entitled and puts his or her own feelings, needs, and desires above those of anybody else in a relationship, and who lacks empathy and sympathy. Interestingly, while narcissists and codependents are typically seen and specified in these opposing terms, they might exhibit comparable behaviors, which includes denial, shame, inefficient boundaries, an important need to control others, and reliance on others for validation. Simply put, most narcissists can also be categorized as codependents, though the reverse is not true. Most codependents don't share the characteristics of narcissists. In fact, about the only things separating narcissists from codependents are narcissists' lack of empathy and sense of privilege. Given all of this, it ends up being a lot easier to see why codependents and narcissists often end up being involved in relationships with one another. A match made in torment. Both narcissists and codependents can appear extremely warm, charming, and caring at the beginning of a relationship. The narcissist to get gratitude and favor, the codependent to value attention. While the codependent can quickly fall for the narcissist's attention and charms, the narcissist can quickly end up being enamored with what the codependent offers, particularly complete control of the relationship. The codependent voluntarily sacrifices limits, personal desires, goals, and even personal joy so as to pursue and please the narcissist, who loves the attention and the feeling of being every little thing and all things to the codependent. Sadly, this initial fairy tale is actually a trap that is doomed to end in anguish. Once the narcissist has won the codependent, though it can be just as fair to say, once the codependent has won the narcissist no longer feels her or his initial charm is needed. Having actually gotten the codependent's love, sacrifice, and care, the narcissist now feels entitled to them. Obviously, the codependent now finds himself or herself in an all too familiar situation. While the codependent frantically craves the love and attention the narcissist at first showered upon him or her, he or she will probably never ever experience it again. The narcissist has already moved on to his or her next conquest. Plus, the more the codependent tries to save or win back or recreate the relationship that he or she has always wanted, the more attention the narcissist receives from the codependent without needing to give anything in return. Getting away from the trap. Codependents do not usually see ending their relationship as a choice, if only because they'd see doing so as a failure, and an individual failure at that. Remember, saving the relationship is the codependent's job. The codependent sees it as his or her responsibility. The narcissist, finding it valuable to keep a person around who's willing to sacrifice her or his boundaries and self to please the narcissist, will continue to string the codependent along and give them just enough attention to keep the codependent's hope alive. Since the narcissist lacks empathy and sees absolutely nothing wrong with her or his own behavior, the narcissist has little reason to change. This means it's usually up to the codependent to end the relationship. But, as a result of codependent's absence of self-esteem, the thought of being by yourself is usually even worse than the thought of staying in an unhealthy, one-sided, loveless relationship. And this is the trap. It's typically not till the codependent reaches some sort of breaking point that she or he ends up being ready to even consider ending the relationship, not to mention look for professional help. However, some sort of professional therapy or psychiatric therapy, and also the support of a group such as Codependents Anonymous or that provided here at Wake Up Healing, is almost always needed for codependents to learn how to set healthy boundaries and comprehend that the only way they will ever find or develop the relationship they know deep down inside is possible is by doing the healing work necessary to love themselves enough not to get involved in another dysfunctional relationship. The codependent narcissist trap isn't an easy trap to get out of, but us codependents can break free, as long as we want to ask for help and do the work necessary to learn how to love ourselves. Have you found yourself in dysfunctional relationships with takers or controllers? Are you still in one? If so, what is keeping you in that relationship? And, if you've got away the trap, what did it take for you to do so? Be sure to share your thoughts and questions so that we can all learn much from and help each other. Chapter 5. Why Codependents Stay in Damaging Relationships. Most people have at least someone in their life who appears to be in the same awful, dead-end relationship over and over again, but the partner appears to change. Upon a much closer look, it is as if the individual is attracted to only one character type and one that's really negative, destructive, and unconcerned. Each relationship seems like the best love. It generally develops rapidly after the breakup of the current bad relationship, and it intensifies from a friendship or casual meeting to a full-blown love affair in record time. While this is happening, Mr. or Mrs. Right ends up being the object of the fixation for the codependent. In the meantime, the narcissist is also showing a very different side of his or her personality, going out of the way to be lovely, attentive, and to do every little thing the codependent person wants and needs to hear and experience. The codependent, ever wishing for the perfect relationship, overlooks the cautionary signs and the obvious repetition of a pattern that she or he has seen a lot of times before. Codependents overlook the guidance of family and friends, focusing instead on building the perfect relationship this time. Once the collaboration is formalized, which might be through marriage or living together, the narcissist takes the mask off. Usually, it begins to slip well before this point, but the codependent is also not going to search for the issues, so the concerns, lies, controls, and really need to control goes untreated. When a codependent sees life as a choice between living in a type of dream matrimonial romance novel or the sheer hell of being single, they become obsessed with the idea of remaining in a romantic relationship, no matter what the cost. When that happens, relationships accumulate, being significantly tangled and messy. Codependents become serial catastrophes, just because they leap in again and again without first doing the work of unearthing the trauma and problems that keep them in their cycle of addiction. Staying in a devastating and damaging marriage or relationship is worth the pain as long as they don't really need to be on their own. Additionally, it is not very likely that a codependent, without support and help, leaves a relationship even if there is psychological, verbal, and physical violence. It is similarly essential to note that this cycle does not just stop all of a sudden. Even if a codependent were to find a healthy partner, her or his codependent behaviors, relationship and personal insecurities, and their inability to be autonomous in a relationship drives off the healthy partner. Going out. It is possible for codependent people to break out of a destructive relationship. In some cases, it occurs due to a violent occurrence, the partner finding a new love interest, or at times, due to the interventions of loved ones. To get out of a codependent relationship, there are some essential steps to take. Work with a therapist. It is easy to fall back into codependent habits. By dealing with a therapist to reveal the trauma and dysfunction that usually formed thoughts about self-respect and control by watching parents engage with each other in unhealthy and codependent ways. Start focusing on you. One of the hardest things for somebody with codependency to do is to concentrate on themselves in a favorable, loving, and encouraging way. Taking small steps and working daily to learn about the real you and not the messages you have heard for years from mentally violent partners is a vital primary step. End up being a comfortable single. Learning how to be comfortable, confident, and entire as a bachelor is a long-lasting objective in recovery from codependency. Reading, learning, and working with experienced specialists can help you to begin to be comfortable with yourself before you proceed to trying a relationship. It is possible to break out of the cycle of codependency. It is also hard work, but it is work that's well worth the effort. Chapter 6. Some relationships are based upon control. A psychological caretaker is someone who watches out for the emotions, needs, and wants of an emotional manipulator. The caretaker defers to the manipulator's wants, giving up their own wants and even their own health and well-being needs. They succumb to keep the peace and to please the other individual, all without enhancement in the relationship. Emotional caretakers are caring, concerned, generous, and reputable people. They genuinely want to please others and are normally nice people. Having said that, they can be easily manipulated by others simply because they have a tendency to be passive and overly compliant, and to have high levels of guilt and commitment, or fear of anger in others. An emotional caretaker would rather feel hurt, upset, or depressed themselves rather than have the individual they care about experience any of those emotions. This makes them highly susceptible to being made the most of and maltreated in relationships with people who are highly self-oriented and self-centered. Many caretakers do not even understand they're quitting so much of themselves. When they do see, they might become resentful and mad, but they keep doing it anyhow. Such clients often ask me, why did I choose to get into a relationship with a person who was so self-centered? But a caretaker character is magnetizing to a psychological manipulator. In the beginning, the relationship appears fantastic. Someone who enjoys to give and someone who loves to get. Regrettably, too often, the receiver just wants more and more, all their own way. While the caretaker secretly hopes that things will balance out in the long run, they never do. I do not believe that psychological caretakers and codependents are the same thing. A lot of caretakers are highly functional, positive, and feel deserving at work and with their friends, while codependents are generally passive, self-invalidating, powerless, and self-defeating in most relationships. When caretakers are in relationships with people who appreciate, value, and have positive regard for them, they get their needs satisfied and there's a very good balance of exchange. And caretakers usually have positive relationships in their lives. However, in an intimate relationship with a manipulator, a psychological caretaker's values and beliefs about giving and caring and their fear of the anger, hostility, and rejection from the manipulator keeps them virtually captive. When the caretaker disagrees or wants something different than the manipulator, they typically do not or can't stand their ground, set limits, or solve distinctions because that level of combat is out of their series of abilities and values. They are at the mercy of a partner whose objective is to get what they want, no matter who it hurts. What is the cost of being a psychological caretaker in a manipulative relationship? Loss of self-confidence, increased anxiety and depression, a growing sense of hopelessness and helplessness, exhaustion, a sense of empty space and increasing hurt, fear, and disappointment. Caretakers typically feel caught in relationships because of their sense of commitment and hesitation to hurt the other individual, no matter what the person has done. Rather than the reactions of fight or flight, most caretakers react to threat, anger, and hostility by shutting down. Their breathing ends up being shallow. They freeze up and wait for the threat to pass. That shutdown process makes thinking fuzzy, as muscles tense up, and even heart and food digestion rates slow down. This response can result in physical problems, such as migraines, indigestion, and other intestinal problems, sleeping disorders, neck, shoulder, and back pains, and a general sense of defeat. How does one stop being an emotional caretaker? The most essential thing to do is value yourself and treat yourself with as much respect as you do others. Value your own wants and needs and choices. Set boundaries that don't enable others to invalidate you, put you down, or overlook what is important to you. Learn to fight and to flee effectively when you are in threat. Take care of yourself first, and then offer your caring to others. It can change your life. Chapter 7. Codependent, or simply reliant. Being codependent is barely the same thing as simply relying, and in some ways, it's vital that these two kinds of reliance be acknowledged as distinct, as too often has not held true. Not that codependent individuals aren't based on others, but paradoxically, they are primarily depending on the other person's dependence on them. So what is the peculiar vibrant operating in such relationships? For, as this post will show, it is not very healthy for either party. It's also important to differentiate codependent relationships from interdependent ones. For as specified psychologically, codependence is plainly maladapted and dysfunctional. It might have a certain mutuality to it, but it's adversely cooperative in a way interdependency is not. Having dependency needs isn't by itself unhealthy. We all have them. In a synergistic relationship, however, each party has the ability to comfortably rely on the other for help, understanding, and support. It is a value-added kind of thing. The relationship adds to both people's resilience, resourcefulness, and inner strength. All the exact same, each party remains self-sufficient and self-determining. They maintain a clear identity apart from the relationship and are rather able to stand on their own 2 feet. On the contrary, a codependent union is one where both parties are overdependent on each other. It is a relationship in which the 2 individuals lean so heavily on one another that both of them are left off balance. And they're frantically trying to get core dependency needs met, their true identities are distorted, and their development and potential, personally, socially, and professionally, is suppressed. The relationship is reciprocal only in that it enables both of them to stay away from facing their worst fears and insecurities. Instead of healthy dependence, specified here as connection, the codependent individual in such a relationship needs to be needed if they are to feel all right about themselves. They simply can't feel that way unless they are giving themselves up or sacrificing themselves for their partner. Sadly, without being depended upon, sometimes practically as a lifeline, they feel alone, insufficient, insecure, and not worthy. Let's now dive deeper into the stress and anxieties and secret shame of the ones that suffer from this malaise. Typically, as kids, the codependent's clingy parents or caretakers repeatedly gave them the message that their own wants and needs should be considered secondary to the caretakers. To the extent that these children neglected their needs and fixated on their parents or caregivers, they could feel valued. But to the degree that they allowed themselves to assert their own, rather lawful dependence needs, they were subject either to indirect punishment, say the quiet treatment, or direct, being verbally or physically assaulted. In so many words, They were told that they were selfish and should feel guilty about thinking only of themselves. And it needs to be noted here that in such families, at the very least, one of the parents or caretakers was most likely an addict, apprehended in their development, and childishly seeking to compensate for their own earlier deprivation through an alternative dependency on their child. That is, they specified the kid's role concerning serving them, not the reverse. Most codependents, then, learned as kids that to be enough to be accepted by their parents, they had to deny or quelch a lot of their thoughts, emotions, and impulses. In attempting to secure their rare and so anxiety-laden adult bond, they were required to ignore what they really liked, really wanted, and needed, even who they were. So it's only to be expected that once grown up, and striving to live a life of their own, they'd be burdened a deep, internalized program routinely reminding them that to be accepted by others, they needed to make their own needs, which at this moment they might only poorly recognize, secondary to others. Early emotional survival programs, once adapted but no longer appropriate, continue to control their thoughts and actions. So, as adults, how might they be characterized? Their self-esteem depends upon the validation of others. They can't self-validate or separately approve of themselves. Their fragile sense of self-respect and well-being is incredibly susceptible, making them highly sensitive and reactive to others. Their ability to assert their needs in a relationship, and, assuming they're in a committed one, not just with their partner but with others also, is highly constrained, and if they do assert them, they're very likely to feel guilty afterwards. Their sense of responsibility centers more on the other person's emotions, needs, wants, and desires than by themselves. Consequently, other people's attitudes, actions, and responses usually govern what they say and do. Their basic ability to set limits with others, and possibly other people's request of or demands on them, is highly restricted, as it was initially with their invasive parents, who routinely used them to compensate for the nurturing they themselves never got from their caretakers. Their behavior is largely determined by an underlying fear of being alone, and so feeling abandoned, spurned, or turned down. Their feelings are experienced as less than their own than linked to another's behavior. Their sense of themselves in circumstances of discord is that their victims, not able to be heard, had compassion with or comprehended. Their compulsive commitment to others can go considerably beyond what is required, and may wind up hurting them. Their personal values are second-guessed, sacrificed, or overlooked when they contravene another's. To protect a relationship, they're actually all set to surrender their own stability. Yet, codependents, and this is just one of the most interesting elements of their character, might not outwardly look dependent. That is, they can camouflage, even beyond recognition, their urgent reliance on others to validate their fundamental worth. How? By saying and doing things that make them seem rather in command, even controlling. Having learned in youth to please and placate their parents, most of them can be managerial with others, and in ways that convey a contrary message about themselves. To hide from others, and certainly from themselves as well, that their lives really feel out of control, they can become the individual that others depend on, making them look more powerful, psychologically and mentally, than they truly are. Truth be told, it's specifically because they believe they can't or shouldn't depend upon others. Again, consider their narcissistic caretakers, that they link their acceptance by others to administering onto them. Become professional volunteers, routinely exceeding the call of duty to show their worth. Spend a lot of time attempting to convince others what to think, feel, and do, though here again, the underlying motive isn't so much to control others, but to feel more safe and secure in their relationship to them. Consistently do favors for, give gifts to, or prepare for the needs of others, though mostly to influence others' reactions to them, making their magnanimity a kind of kickback. Motivate others to let them be their caretaker or confidant, or otherwise end up being indispensable to them, in the hope of getting rid of any chance of desertion which can be scary to them. Take on the role of problem solver, decision maker, support individual, rescuer, or rescuer. Use sex to enhance the chance of approval, puzzling sex for real intimacy, which, given their past, is highly bothersome or confusing for them. Control people and circumstances by way of connecting or synthetically bonding with them. Take note of the fact that in all these circumstances, the codependent's behavior, whether controlling, manipulative, helpful, super responsible, sacrificial, or saving, is driven by the same never-met youth need to be totally, unconditionally accepted by their caretakers. And that includes having the ability to feel safe and safeguarded, attending to, empathized with, appreciated, esteemed, in a word, nurtured. So in their seriously misdirected adult mission for, regrettably conditional, relational approval, there's really little that they will not do. Furthermore, as already suggested, despite the pretense of strength and a non-self-interest desire to serve others, rather than in some way inducing others to serve them, the underlying dependence of so much of their conduct should be apparent, for literally giving themselves away to others is experienced by them as needed if they are to ease their insecurities and self-perceived deficiencies. Their really sense of self, as inauthentic as it is, necessitates that they do all they can to receive others' approval, and they prepare for and cater to others' dependency needs primarily to fortify their shaky belief in their worthiness. Finally, not truly relying on others, for they could never trust their parents or caregivers who undoubtedly became their models for how to be in relationships, their own carefully cultivated reliability iconically sets them up to be taken advantage of, as, likewise, their clingy caretakers exploited their typical youth dependencies to take advantage of them. The word codependent was initially employed as synonymous with the earlier term enabler. As broadly described, enablers helped addicts in their compulsive dependence by being accountable for them, making excuses for them, or lessening or rejecting the many repercussions of their inefficient behavior. Typically, their problem centered on excessive drinking, since the classification originally originated from Alcoholics Anonymous and the growing recognition that the problem drinker's troubles were best understood in the bigger setting of family and friends, who, nevertheless unsuspectingly, supported, or at the very least enabled, their unhealthy behavior. So, if codependents accidentally promote what's detrimental to the health and well-being of the afflicted individual they're probably helping, just how useful are they? And the answer is pretty uncomplicated. As Sean M. Burns puts it in her Psychology Today blog site Clearheadedness, in dysfunctional helping relationships, one person helps, supports, enables the other's underachievement, irresponsibility, immaturity, addiction, procrastination, or poor mental or physical health, and the helper does this by doing such things as saving the other from self-imposed dilemmas, bearing their negative repercussions for them, accommodating their unhealthy or irresponsible habits, and looking after them that they don't develop or display proficiencies regular for those of their age or abilities. The codependents actually cultivating the addict's reliance on them doesn't much help themselves either. The addict may satisfy their need to be needed, and thus valued by another, but their relationship hinders their growth also. It avoids them from maturing and being independent, self-expressive, and self-validating. In a sense, the relationship, though strangely enough steady, is regressive for both parties. Undoubtedly, they can learn on each other. The addict more for material sustenance, the codependent more for emotional security. But the union does not begin to show any sort of healthy dependence or connection. This has been Codependency. Signs of Codependent Relationships and Relationship Traps. Written by Gregory Haynes. Narrated by Sarah Margrave.